Okay.
So if you're just hitting record, let's go back and do the title.
Okay.
The title of today's talk
is the Improvement Kata Annual Improvement Planning Meets Agile and Lives Happily Ever After. Our speaker today is Kathy Iberle, and we're just getting started. Hope everyone's doing well today. Okay. Ready for the intro?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next slide then. Kathy Iberle is an invited speaker with PNSQC. And give me one sec. PNSQC is an annual software quality conference held here in Portland, Oregon. It's the oldest software quality conference in North America, now in its 33rd year. Kathy, are you going to switch slides?
Yeah.
Okay. Do that.
Oh, this is odd. We are not seeing the slide switching. I am switching slides, and you're not seeing it.
Okay. Let's see. Screen. Is it showing my screen?
No.
Okay, give me one sec.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, there we go.
It's fine.
Okay, so.
Like I was saying, about the webinar today. It's brought to you by PNSQC, the Pacific Northwest Software Quality Conference, which is held October 12th through the 14th. For information about today's webinar, we will be recording it and will be made available. We'll send an email out to everyone who's registered with a short survey at the end. If you have any questions at all, there is both a hand raising or the chat function. The chat function is the easiest one that we'll be able to answer questions, and there's also a question section in the GoToWebinar control panel. I guess chat is a bit more informal. Questions are questions that will be directed toward Kathy. If you're tweeting this, we have the PNSQC hashtag too. So today's webinar brought to you by Kathy Iberle. She's invited speaker for PNSQC. She will be speaking October 13th. Her presentation today is a preview of that talk, the Improvement Kata, Annual Improvement Planning Meets Agile, Lives Happily Ever After. She'll also be co-leading a workshop on October 14th, and there's still time to register for that. And now I am going to hand it over to Kathy, and she'll tell you a little bit about herself and get this webinar going. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Melissa. So as I said, my name is Kathy Iberle. I'm a consultant in the Portland area. I've spent about 30 years in technology at this point, starting as a software developer, and later I did quality engineering. I did process improvement. I worked for Hewlett-Packard most of that time, so I did worked in a variety of places and did a variety of projects, hardware, software, printers, medical equipment, IT projects, and had the opportunity to work in a lot of different places. So I got to see a lot of different ways to develop software and to do process improvement. I've been doing Agile on and off since the mid-90s. And about 8 years ago, I was introduced to Lean. And I was really excited about Lean because it explains for me why Agile is working. And that enables me to apply Agile in places where the Scrum books don't tell you how to do it. So for instance, if you're trying to do a mixed hardware software project and you cannot do hardware on a 2-week sprint or a 3-week sprint, what do? And understanding Lean principles helps you understand how you can get Agile results from a variety of kinds of projects. So today I'm doing consulting on Lean and Agile for these sort of odd projects, and I still do some software quality as well. So we were going to do surveys, but those aren't working, so we'll skip that and go to how many of you are doing annual improvement plans? This might be Hoshin planning, scoreboard, balanced scorecard, things where you have to start at the beginning of the year and say what you're going to do for the year to achieve an improvement. And they're often really detailed plans like you see here. We have a raise your hand function on the webinar. You should see a little hand that you can click on to say you do annual improvement plans. So can you see that, Melissa? So Melissa, can you tell us how many people raised their hands?
Yes, there are at least 2 so far.
Okay, so some of you are doing annual improvement. And then Agile. How many of you are doing Agile development?
I know I am.
Okay, who and
Ooh,
other people that are raising their hands?
More than 4, 5 people.
Okay, so quite a few of you. Great. So people who are doing Agile and being asked to do annual improvement plans often notice there's kind of a conflict between them.
Yes.
And it's not because Agile isn't about doing improvement. Actually, Agile is really all about doing improvement. You've got retrospectives built into the process. Every few weeks, the team stops and reflects on what they've been doing and considers how they could do things better and implements change. So that's not really the way that where the conflict comes from. Conflicts are coming from the very different assumptions that the two methods are taking. So the annual planning methods are assuming that you can know what change you should make upfront at the beginning of the year. Agile is assuming you can discover the change through experience. Agile is assuming that you should be working at the team level first and that teams can identify solutions and drive them. Annual planning is assuming that you need to drive things from the top of the organization down. And what I've seen is that they're both right and they're both wrong. One of the big things that is a problem is the annual planning is assuming that you can know at the beginning of the year how you're going to get to your goal. And you can make a plan, I'm going to make this change and then this change and then this change and then this change, and it will all work out. Unfortunately, what actually happens looks a lot more like this. The first couple of things go okay, and then you discover that one of the changes doesn't work. Perhaps the cause that you believe to be the cause of the problem is not actually the cause, or there's more than one cause. You fix one cause and find you need to fix another one, or your solution doesn't work the way you thought it was going to. So you have to stop and replan. And this happens typically over and over every month or two, and on the annual planning projects I've been on, and you end up doing several replannings throughout the year. So you're throwing away a bunch of work, replacing it with other work, and then you throw some of that planning work away and do more work. So it ends up being pretty expensive. A good organization will get to the end, but at quite a cost. Others give up halfway through, and some of them actually continue trying to do the original plan even after it doesn't make sense anymore because they committed at the beginning of the year, and their organization's expecting them to do what they said even if it doesn't make sense now. That can be very problematic. So that's not a good thing. And the Agile doesn't have that problem because you're doing the retrospectives on a short time basis, so you're not planning very far ahead, and you don't get stuck with these big design upfront plans that really don't help. However, what you do get with Agile retrospectives is that since you're working from a team level, unless you have more of a structure above the team level has a lot of trouble influencing change outside of the team. And in this slide, you can see down in the middle of the bottom, there's a poster from a retrospective that has people we can influence in a big circle. And then outside the circle, it says the soup. And I've seen this a lot, this type of thing come up is you can change some things, but there's things you would like to change you can't change. You're working on one change and another team next to you is working on a different change. You'd like to have them working on the same change, but there isn't any mechanism to make that happen. So difficulty with Agile retrospectives is handling things that require more than one team to collaborate, maybe several teams that aren't very strongly connected to each other, or the change needs to take place over a long period of time.
Hey, Kathy, can I interrupt
yes.
really fast? One of the attendees asked a question, or answered a question, one of your original ones about what methods they use. And they're saying that they work for an agency and some projects are very short term with light processes, and that they use Kanban boards with a project retrospective instead of sprints or regular retros. Do you want to talk a little bit about comparisons?
Between Agile and Kanban?
Yeah, just different retrospective processes, please.
So I don't know what the questioner, did the question say they were doing retrospectives or they weren't doing them?
Not for every single project.
Yeah, and that would be pretty common. In Kanban, if you're doing full on Kanban, it doesn't have sprints, so there's not a place that you keep stopping to do retrospectives, but it is fairly common in Kanban to have retrospectives every month or 2 months, sometimes on a cadence, sometimes more driven by things have happened. If you're doing them frequently, then you get the small scale effect that you see with Agile, where you can see ahead where you're going, but you also have some of the same problems of not being able to influence things outside your immediate team very well. Okay. So I think it's pretty similar in that respect.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I can't see all of the questions that are being asked, Melissa. I'm apparently seeing some, but not all.
Okay.
So if you can interrupt me, that is a good thing.
Okay. Yeah, they were the person saying that they do have retrospectives at the end of the project whenever possible.
No, that sounds like a good practice.
Okay.
So
I just wanted.
You're looking at process.
Sorry. You're up.
Okay. So if you're looking at a process improvement method for your company, not necessarily for an individual team, but for your company, what you'd like to have your process improvement method do is you'd like to have it handle all this uncertainty of not knowing what change is going to work, so that you keep getting new information. I think process improvement is more uncertain and more unknown even than software development. In software development, we know that we don't know how long exactly it's going to take to get something done or exactly what we're going to need to do to make the feature work. So a lot of the Agile methods deal really well with that. We want to be able to handle the same kind of uncertainty in process change, be able to adapt to new information, not plan too far ahead, but we also want to be able to scale up. We want to be able to solve big problems. We want to be able to drive change across multiple teams. So the reason I'm excited about the Improvement Kata is I think it's a method that does both. It can understand it can handle the uncertainty and it can scale up. So I'll tell you a little bit about where it came from and then what the Improvement Kata is, and then talk about one piece of it in more detail. And if you want to see the whole thing, you'll need to come to PNSQC or read the paper after it's published at PNSQC. So the Improvement Kata is the result of research into what Toyota does. And Toyota is famous for their ability to improve continuously and adapt. And they do this both in their manufacturing processes and in their development processes. And they've done this for decades. They were doing this before the idea of Agile software was, or the name Agile software was around. They were doing this long before. So they've been doing continuous improvement for a very long time, very effectively. What isn't real clear is how were they achieving that? There's a fair amount written on some of the mechanisms they use, like looking for waste and the A3s and all of that, but not much on how were they thinking, how were they getting people to think about what change would work. So Dr. Mike Rother at the University of Michigan spent 6 years investigating this with the intention of explaining it well enough that people at other companies could adopt it. And at first he called this the Toyota Kata, and he wrote this book a few years ago called the Toyota Kata to capture the patterns for managing and for thinking about process change. And he's now calling it the Improvement Kata. I have some references in the slides at the end of this talk that you may find helpful. So you might be wondering at this point, what is a kata? Funny word, kata is a Japanese word that means a practice routine. So if you learn a musical instrument, you have to do scales. Scales are a kata. They're routines that help us adopt new ways of thinking, new ways of doing things. They help us leave habits behind and form new habits. And you'll see how this is used in the process improvement method as I go through this. So that's what a kata is. And this is the improvement kata in a nutshell. You start a plan, usually a big plan like an annual plan. You set a goal for the whole year. That's called the direction or challenge, and you can see that's number 1 up in the corner here. Melissa, can you see the mouse when I wave it around?
Yeah, a little bit. That's okay.
Okay. Probably better if I don't then. So the direction or challenge would be, for instance, 10x quality improvement would be a challenge. That'd be a big challenge. So the first thing you do is decide what the challenge is, and that's usually done by upper managers. Then you ask, what's our current condition with respect to the challenge? If we're supposed to get a 10x quality improvement, what's our quality now? And what do we know about where the defects are coming from? And what do we not know? So understand the current condition. So far, this is pretty much the same as most big process improvement methods, same as balanced scorecards, same as Hoshin planning, and all that sort of thing. The next step, however, is different from many of them. And the next step is number 3 is establish your next target condition. And by target condition, they mean a point partway to the challenge where some improvements have been made, but not all of them. So the intent is not to set a target condition that says we have come up with a plan or we have done an investigation, but rather a target condition that's fixed part of the problem. So you set this about a month out. And for 10x quality improvement, it would be tempting to set a target condition that was, say, a 2x quality improvement. But that doesn't work very well because it's kind of spreading your effort thinly over a lot of different things. Instead, it's better to pick one thing and focus on it. So I might look at all the categories of defects and pick one type of defects. For instance, we're missing a certain type of requirements. We frequently have things returned because the user did something we didn't expect. We're clearly not understanding what the user's doing. So pick one category and drive it down as close to 0 as you can get. And then pick another category, and you just do that repeatedly. So that's a target condition. And then, in order to get there, you're saying, well, I want to get rid of this category of defects. Well, how am I going to do that? That's also not entirely known. So you conduct experiments to get there. You do short steps over and over to achieve the target condition. And there's a whole scale-up method involved with the improvement kata. It's basically nested target conditions on a cadence. So very much like Agile, where you have user stories and you have epics, you can think of the larger target conditions as epics, and you have a cadence to get all of the different teams that are working on things to hang together and to meet together to discuss which one they're going to do next so that they can collaborate with each other. And this is a very powerful structure, and I really like this structure. However, I'm not going to talk about this structure today because today I want to talk about the iterating to a target condition. How do you actually do that? And what does it look like, and why is it different from what you're probably doing now? So we have you're iterating to the target condition. You're making small, rapid experiments to advance your knowledge. You're assuming that you don't know exactly how you're going to get to where you're going, and you're going to try something and see if it works. So you want to try it in a short, fast fashion so you're not spending very much time trying it, see what the results are, and then decide whether to go forward with that plan or to do a different plan. And what this is called basically is the Plan, Do, Check, Act. And a lot of process improvement methods already include Plan, Do, Check, Act. This is basically the scientific method. You come up with a hypothesis, you test the hypothesis, and then you decide what to do based on what you saw. First called Plan, Do, Check, Act back in the 1930s. So it's been around a while. The way the Improvement Kata uses this, however, that's different from other methods I've seen, is it's actually using this daily, that you're doing Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle almost every day. So I'm going to show a kata here. It's actually fairly hard to do this. So the folks at Toyota came up with a kata or a structured method to do it that they have everybody do that helps people keep track of where they are and what they're doing. So you start out with saying, what are you going to do? What do you expect to see? So if I'm going to try to eliminate some requirements defects, I'm going to do something. What is that? For instance, we're going to look at a bunch of defect records to see what kinds of requirements are being missed. Then what do you expect to see out of that? And do you expect to see a pattern? Then what did you actually see, which is often different from what you saw, and what did you learn? And then once you've seen that, then you go to what you try next. And then what do you expect to see, and you just keep repeating it. So this may remind you of a lab notebook. It should, because this is how lab notebooks are structured. Those of you who are in testing, this probably looks like a test case sheet. The test case sheets are exactly this way. What are you going to do? What do you expect to see? What did you actually see? And then are you going to file a defect or not? The interesting part of this, when you actually try it, is that people tend to want to go from what did you see to what you will try next without going through what did you learn. And we practice this with people, asking them, what did you do, what did you actually see? And they will tell me what they saw, and without even stopping to breathe, they will tell me what they're going to try next. Your brain is really running. This is a very normal human behavior. This is actually a good survival behavior. This is very helpful when you're driving. What did you see? What are you going to do next? You don't want to stop and think about what you learned. You want to react. So very helpful for driving and riding a bicycle and being chased by a tiger. Good survival mechanism. So it's really embedded in our brains to see and do, see and do. Getting people to stop and think about what they learned and do some analysis takes, you have to break the behavior and do new behavior. So the Improvement Kata folks, or the folks in Toyota actually, added another kata or practice to this. Not only do you do the sheet, but the person who is making the process change is called the learner, and they call them the learner very intentionally, that the person making the process change is learning about the process. So they assign a coach for the learner, and the coach's job is to ask the learner the questions. So the two of them do a very quick meeting, a stand-up meeting, every day or two in front of with the PDCA sheet in front of them, either on the wall or on their desk. And the coach asks the learner, what was your last step? What did you expect to see? what did you actually see and what did you learn? And what we see people doing is they stop, if they spend even 60 seconds thinking about what they learned, they see the next step differently. They realize that there are other things that they could be doing that are more they are not jumping to conclusions. It takes very little time actually to do this, but if you don't do it very consciously, it doesn't get done.
Yeah, it's the importance of documentation every step of the way.
Well, the documenting is there to get people to think about it. I don't think the documentation afterwards that anybody did anything with the PDCA cycle record sheets afterwards. The importance of doing the sheet is to make you think, well, what did you expect to see? And it's very helpful to do that before you actually do the step. What do you expect to see? And then what actually happens.
Okay. Kathy, there's a question from the audience asking if you could give an example.
I am going to give an example.
Perfect.
Yes. So before I go to the example, I'll just say where the example came from. Along with Adam Light of SOTEC Advisors, we've been implementing the Improvement Kata in IT organizations. So this is pretty typical IT, multiple teams, multiple development teams, plus system test team, deployment team, etc. And sometimes it's Agile teams, sometimes a mix of Agile and not so Agile. And introduce the Improvement Kata with the full scaling up. So the PDCA was one of the first things, and it just takes a couple of weeks for people to learn the PDCA, but then you get to see them use it for a whole year while you're implementing the other parts of the Improvement Kata. So we got to see quite a lot of the Improvement Kata. And to be honest, when I first saw it on paper, I thought, wow, that's a lot of stuff to be doing. This seems kind of like overkill. Do people really need to do this? But when I saw it in practice, I was really impressed by what I saw happening. So this is a pretty typical thing we would see. Here's an example. Group is a system test group, and they go install their applications to test them, and they can't get it installed because someone's changed the network configuration. So their obstacle is these unexpected network changes that they didn't know about. So ask the learner, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to write an approval process for this other group so that they tell me when they're going to make changes. It seems reasonable, right? So you write a process, give it to the other group. What do you expect to see? Well, I expect them to follow the process and tell me when they're making changes, and now I won't have so much trouble. Cool. So they write the process, they give it to the other team. What actually happens? The other team did not like the process. They said it was going to take too long, that they would have to fill out forms for a lot of different changes, and it was going to slow them down. So if you don't do the what we learned step, what happens generally, because I've seen this type of thing a lot of times before, the next step is, well, make them do it. They're being troublemakers, they should be more cooperative, they should make them do it. When you ask, what did you learn? What we saw happen was that the learner thought more about the process. Just asking the question caused the learner to think, what does this look like? What did I learn about this process? I've learned that what the other team is doing is more complicated than what I thought. They had more network changes going on than I thought. We realized that there's two categories of network changes. There's big ones and small ones. Maybe we don't need to ask them to fill out forms for the small ones. So they've learned, and so the point of view changed from the other team as being troublemakers to the other team is also doing a job that I don't fully understand. So next logical step generally is find out more about the problems, and then once you do that, you've learned what the problem is, rewrite the process. So what I saw happen was that the learners got this immediate change to understanding the the process better and what the problems were, and they also then realized that it wasn't a super great idea to write the entire process out in a whole lot of detail and then hand it out. That it was better to do just a rough draft and ask the other people for their opinion right away, so you waste less time having to rewrite stuff that way. I've done process improvement for a lot of years, and I've taught process improvement in meetings and short classes and by mentoring individuals. And so this is something I've known for a long time, is it's a good idea to do a rough draft and send it out. But I can tell people that, and it takes them a while. It takes them actually a long while to get that. These folks learned it themselves without me telling them, and they learned it right away, and then it stuck. And you could see them using that idea again and again over the next months. So it was pretty amazing. It works faster than formal training and process improvement. And the idea is, once somebody realizes one of those things, because they realized it through experiences, it's sticking in their heads and they're able to use it. So I'm actually quite impressed by how well this works. So we found while doing this that if you don't do it with a coach, it isn't going to work. It's really important for somebody to be asking that question of what did you learn, and to see the learner stop and think about it. At Toyota, the people doing the coaching are the managers, and the managers are expected to do this coaching, and it's part of their job to teach scientific thinking, is the way it's referred to at Toyota. We saw some groups with the managers doing the coaching, and some where it was more on the level of peer coaching. And I think of that kind of like pair programming. It's certainly possible to have a peer asking the questions, although in some cases it's more helpful to have the manager doing it, because the manager has the ability to get help for the learner if they've run into an impediment that they can't clear by themselves. We did see that it's not necessary for the coach to know what the answers are. The coach does not need to be expert in the same field the learner is. They're really there to help the learner stop and think. This is a good point to stop and ask if there's questions.
Yes, there are a couple. So one from the audience was, how do you get started with this and then keep it going?
A good question.
And related to that one is, does a crisis have to occur and you bring in a consultant before they start doing this? Or is it the manager who suggests it and they're the driving force?
Well, let's do the second one first,
okay,
and then remind me about the first one. Okay, so that is a general question about process change. Anytime somebody is going to change what they're doing, you generally have to have some kind of pain somewhere. Somebody has to feel pain and want to change. Otherwise, most people don't like doing change. They like the results of change, but they would rather not actually do it, and so things don't change. So sometimes you get a group that is excited about doing a new method, and they start doing it on their own. Sometimes this comes in with a consultant. Sometimes there's internal people who set up and run new methods. If you think about how you adopted Agile or any other method, that would be an indication of how ready your company is to do this kind of thing with internal support, where somebody goes out and reads about the method and gets started, or whether you want a consultant to come in and help. The way that you start doing the Improvement Kata, Mike Rother definitely recommends having someone expert start you on it, and particularly the planning part is harder to sort out than the PDCA, I think. So generally what you do is get a small group of people who are going to learn the method from a consultant, and then they go out or they go to a training class and learn it, and then they go out and spread it. On the PDCA, adopting that, what we found was that it was critical to have trained coaches. the coaches had to know how to coach, and that there were a number of fine points on coaching. So when Adam and I introduced it, we started as coaches, and we did coaching mostly over the phone. Had regular coaching meetings with people where they showed their PDCA sheets and we coached. And once a person had been coached for several weeks and had a little bit more training about it, talking about coaching and pointing out some of the aspects, then they were able to be effective coaches themselves. I think it's probably easier to come up to speed as a coach if you've had some science background. I have 2 master's degrees in chemistry. I spent a lot of time doing lab notebooks and hypotheses, so it comes more easily. Also, if you've done a lot of exploratory testing, that's a lot of the same process, so it's going to come easier to people who've done either of those things. Part of it is being able to state a hypothesis, and part of it is being able to ask good questions of the learner and to know when to ask a question.
Okay.
So that was the first. So did I cover both questions?
A bit, I think so. How about you're interested in doing this, you get it started, how do you keep it going?
Okay, that actually, the next slide speaks some to that.
Okay.
Okay, so to keep the PDCA going, you need to maintain the momentum. So you want those steps to be really, really short. They should not take more than 30 to 60 minutes for the person to do over a period of maybe 2 days. So it's not a big disruption to their work. So they're really short steps. In my paper, I have an example of someone developing a process for defect root cause analysis. And step 1 is asking the rest of their department if anybody already has a process. And then what they find out is nobody does. So then the next step is going out and doing a little bit of a literature search and what you learn from that. And so the steps are really small. The coaching meetings need to be 2 or 3 times a week. If you don't do them that often, then you're going to lose momentum. If you try and do bigger steps and less frequent meetings, it doesn't work. Everything just grinds to a halt. At Toyota, they're doing them every day. We were doing them 2 or 3 times a week, and we found that would maintain the momentum. And those coaching meetings have to be at regular times, so it's just like a stand-up meeting. If you don't have it at regular times, people miss them, and then they just stop doing it. And if you don't stick to the questions and keep the meeting short, it'll be too hard to do, and again, that'll fall apart. In the longer realm, people are working on a change. So you do PDCA towards a goal that's fairly close, and it's something that you've identified in a retrospective as needing change is probably about the right size to do PDCA to get there. A change that is going to take 6 months is too big. You need some intermediate points. And if you don't have people if you don't have some management setting intermediate points, then again, the whole thing tends to not have the momentum to keep going. And I'm going to talk about that more in the invited speaker talk in the workshop in October. So does that help?
Yeah, that was very good. Are there any other questions? Anyone in the audience? I think Dan had asked one. How often does this occur? Like, do you know of a lot of companies that are doing this?
Well, there's a lot of companies in manufacturing, automotive. We believe there are quite a number of companies doing this in more hardware fields. Software, not so much. There is a consultant in Europe who's been teaching this for 3 or 4 years now, and I know he's using it at his company because he writes about it, and I'm not sure how many other companies that have adopted the Improvement Kata. And there's not been much in the IT world in the U.S. that I know about, so it's still pretty new.
Hey, Kathy, this is Dan.
Yeah.
I think this is fascinating, and I'm seeing like applications in all kinds of businesses for this. I mean, it almost seems like it'll be the next big thing in consulting. What do you say? I mean, I could see how we could be using this in our communications consulting business.
Oh yeah, it's a very generalized method, and if you go to Mike Rother's page, and maybe I'll go down here to, so Mike Rother has the book, and then he has a web page where he has all kinds of tools for this. I presented really only a little piece of the process. Those reflection questions are part of a bigger set of questions that help you stay on track going towards your target condition. It's part of that hierarchical planning. And so he's got a group of over 700 people who are following the Improvement Kata. I believe a lot of them are practicing it, and they're doing it in different fields. So when they've had 1 or 2 Improvement Kata summits now, and the people coming are from a lot of different fields. So, and I'm saying it's not being used much in software. I did a lot of research for the paper trying to see if anybody else had written about using it or presented at conferences. And in software, it's still very little, and but in other fields, there were more. So yeah, it's real general purpose, and Mike Rother is publishing stuff about applying it in education and just a lot of different fields.
Yeah, it seems like it would have applications in medicine too.
Yeah, that will be one of the places where, and go back to the target condition picture here because we've got some really good stories from medicine about this, really.
Yeah.
One of the, hopefully the slides are changing for you guys. So you get the challenge. The challenge is, one of the examples that I read about was the challenge is to reduce, to eliminate infections in a hospital. And they used the Improvement Kata to get there. First, you want to eliminate the infections, so you do it by understanding what your different sources of infection are, and then your target conditions is take one source of infections, drive it to 0. Take another source of infections, drive it to 0. Take another source of infections, drive it to 0. Over the period of a year, or you can you have a massive drop in the number of hospital infections. They had cases of hospital infections, hospital record-keeping errors, all kinds of stuff that's, you read the beginning condition and you're feeling a little like you don't want to go to a hospital. And then you read the end and it's like, wow, this really worked. And it said doing the short plans to keep people moving, that every day you do a little something, and it's adding up to visible progress that you can see. One of the things we had our folks do is every time they achieved a target condition, we had them write what we called a success card that said, describe the change they had made and what the benefit was, and post it up on the wall so they could see a record of, here's all the changes we've made. It may seem like we're not doing much because we're only working 30 minutes every 2 days, but over a period of a month, look what we've done.
Yeah, it seems like a new twist on Deming's continuous improvement.
Well,
which came from Japan too, basically.
Well, yeah, Deming went to Japan and taught the continuous improvement, and Toyota people definitely studied with him and based what they were doing on that. So, yeah, the Walter Schuhart and Deming and the PDCA was in there as part of the founding ideas.
Yeah, this almost seems like it could become part of a company's brand, for instance. We use the Improvement Kata in our systems.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen that happen yet. seemed like it was actually fairly challenging to get this idea from, to figure out what Toyota was really doing, because they weren't calling this the Improvement Kata. They weren't calling it anything. It was just what they did. So Mike rather was going around watching what people were doing and recording it and trying to figure out what are they really doing, which is part of that they emphasize with Grasp the Current Condition is go see what's actually happening. There's infections, you go see what is being done at the station. And it's harder to think about how that works in a software environment, but you want to, at the very least, go talk to the people who are making the network changes or whatever it is, collecting the requirements, writing the code. Watch what they're doing, ask them what they're doing, see what's actually happening. Don't make assumptions, don't take it on secondhand reports. And they're really emphasizing that the people who are making the changes, the learners, are the people who do the process. They're not somebody who comes in from outside and tells you what to do.
Yeah, so it's really important to take that step back and to objectivity instead of becoming subjective and emotional, and like you say, skipping that learning piece.
And rather has been emphasizing that it's not a question of being emotional in a negative way. It's a normal and important human behavior to jump to conclusions. It's absolutely necessary. We couldn't get through the day without it. So we're very good at it. And in order to stop and reflect, we need to not do something that we're very good at. And that's why the kata or practice routines are so important, is it's supporting you to do something that doesn't come naturally, and to not overdo it as well, but to be there to support you with the structure. And what they say is that after you've done this for a long time, you'll be good enough at it that you may not need all the structure anymore. I think of it like counting in music. I learned,
right.
yeah. I learned an instrument very late in life and learned to read music, and so my teacher's making me count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and I'm in a community band, and I'm counting all the time, watching the conductor, 1 and 2 and 3, and people tell me that when you get really good, you no longer count consciously. I don't think I'm ever going to get there. That's a kata I need, is the counting. But it's there to help me do something that doesn't come naturally.
Yeah, I have the same experience. I late in life trying to learn how to dance, and I'm almost to the point where I can stop counting 1, 2, 3, 4, but not quite,
Mm-hmm. And
but
I
it's,
think
yeah, you're right. That's a kata. I hadn't thought of it that way.
And the questions, doing the PDCA sheet, I think, is a good practice. I actually started doing them some of the time just with the consulting work that I was doing on my own, and sometimes stopping and writing, well, why was I trying this? What did I think I would see? What did I actually see? What did I learn about my practice, about my client, about the process? What did I learn? And so
how many of these sheets do you have per project?
Oh, myself? Well, I'm not usually keeping them, so.
Oh, okay.
It's more of yeah.
But is it important to keep those and go back and review them?
Well,
if you're learning this.
I think when you're first learning it, yes, and it was more useful since you're using the sheets to do process improvement. The client is doing process improvement, so studying the client's sheets was very helpful, and listening to them during their coaching meetings, seeing what they're doing, why they're doing it, what they're thinking about, and how to explain things to help people move forward. When you're actually doing your own work, most of the time you're not changing your own process, so it's not as applicable. But it's a good question to keep asking yourself, though. What have I learned? What have I learned?
And it looks like Melissa's got a question too. Melissa?
Yeah, it's related to you keep talking about the small steps. What can you give examples of how small the steps should be?
Yeah, that it goes back to this slide. You should be able to do the step in a couple of days, and it shouldn't take more than 30 to 60 minutes. What we found is if it was longer than that, people didn't do the step because they didn't have time in between their other work. So you want to have fast feedback, that's the 1 to 2 days, and not be disruptive. And that was the 30 to 60, your mileage may vary with that. You may be able to do more. So doing a draft of a process, sending it out for review, trying a new process with just 1 or 2 people. This was another one that is a tendency to write it up and want 20 people to switch over to it right away. No, just try it with 1 person. And so that's how. And so one of the questions that I didn't show you is how soon can we find out the results? And this was another one that was a big thinking question, is simply asking, like, this is what I'm going to do next. Okay, how soon can we see if that worked? 2 weeks. Okay, how could we see if that would work in less than 2 weeks? Can we do something that would tell me day after tomorrow if that would work? And that really is a challenge. That's a challenge a lot like the first time someone tells you you should have all your user stories should fit in less than 3 weeks. You're going, yeah, I can't make any feature that's that small. But you find that you can. And with the process improvement, this was another one, was trying to get people to do stuff that was just a couple of days. And so a lot of it was, you want to do that, what's the hypothesis behind that? And what's the hypothesis, and then how could you prove or disprove that hypothesis?
That's
so a lot of short trials.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Melissa, I don't know about you. I can hardly wait to hear the whole presentation October 13th. What do you think?
No, I like this a lot. This is
yeah, me too.
Sorry, I've been taking notes, so I'm not as attentive.
So what other questions do we have? It looks like someone is asking if the improvement kata has to start from a manager. What if my manager's not an process improvement kind of person?
Ooh.
Well, I have to say that I haven't got personal experience with doing that at this point. It looks to me like the PDCA sheet is something that a team could do whether or not their manager was involved, that they could do peer coaching with each other. And I would say, though, I haven't tried it, but I would like to see it tried and get a report on it, because it seems to me that should work for the same reason that pair programming works or peer reviews work. You just need someone else asking you the questions. And then as far as the larger scale process improvement structure, if your organization isn't trying to do process improvement, then any method is going to be a real struggle, no matter what it is.
So the trick is a team and or a manager for coaching.
That's why it's always helpful when people come to you in crisis.
Mm-hmm. It's also the experiences can change beliefs. So if a manager sees a team making improvements in a consistent fashion and then sees the results of the improvements are positive, the manager might change their mind. So sometimes making a bunch of small changes and making it visible that you're making changes and how you're making them can end up affecting what the person believes. about the usefulness of process improvement.
You talked a little bit about wanting to see results within days instead of within weeks. Can you give any other examples related to that? Just how do people have those results so fast?
Yeah, we got that question a lot. And so some of the methods that were used was you're trying to change a process. You look for an opportunity, the project that is nearly up to the stage you're trying to change. So this was an IT department. You're likely to have 3 or 4 applications in different stages of development at the same time, and you want to look at the handoff to testing. Well, you pick one that's almost ready to hand off to testing, so that helps. Look for opportunities. Look for small things. We found that if you've got a maintenance department that pushes through small changes really fast, that's a very good place to try out things, because they're doing small changes that are going through the entire process out to deployment quickly. So try the change there first and see if it works. We found that sampling, some people were just thinking they had to collect all the data on everything, and it's like, no, you don't have to. You can do a sampling, and that makes it a lot faster. So you're looking to see how many, whether or not, if you're looking to see whether or not adding a type of review will decrease the number of defects you find in system tests. Well, one of the clues is going to be how many defects did that review find. If that review found some defects, that's a positive thing. So do the review, see if it finds any defects. If it doesn't find any defects, then it's not going to reduce the amount in system tests. You don't have to wait for system tests to happen to find that out. So you just look at things somewhat differently to see if you can do them in small steps, doing early drafts, doing simulations, or just a pilot test with one person instead of the whole team, and look for really small, fast projects, because those go through your whole process faster.
Okay. Kathy, here's another question. How does the Improvement Kata process align with Agile team roles like Scrum Master, Product Owner, Developer, and Tester?
Well, any one of those people can be a learner. They can all be learners. And we had Agile teams doing pretty much, it doesn't line up with the roles. It doesn't need to. When you're changing a process, you're looking for the person who's working most closely with that process. And if it's the requirements, that may be the product owner. If it's a testing, it might be the tester, might be a developer. But you look for the people who are working with the process and to be the learners. So the most hands-on person will know the most.
Okay.
And in the cases we were doing, most of the cases, either the manager or the Scrum Master was playing the role of the coach.
Okay. That does help. We're at 10 o'clock now, so should we go to the Learn More slide just to show people some of the resources, and then we're also going to have these slides available and a recording of the webinar available in hopefully by the end of today. We just need to get that up. So here are resources. You can learn more. And don't forget, Kathy is giving her invited speaker talk on October 13th, and she's giving a workshop on the 14th at PNSQC. You can find more information at pnsqc.org. And yes, the workshop is with her collaborator, Adam Light.
And Rita reminds us that this will all be available via social media.
Yeah.
And please follow us on Twitter and Facebook as we run up to the conference.
Oh, yeah. And I believe early bird registration is happening for a few more days too.
Yeah, we got an extension.
Yes.
So remember, watch for that hashtag, PNSQC15. And wow, thanks a lot, Kathy. This was really cool.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing all of you at PNSQC. I know some of you out there are folks that I've done paper reviews with, and it'll be good to see you again.
Yeah, it's coming up fast.
All right.
Okay, well, thanks to everybody for attending. And again, thank you, Kathy, for taking time out of your schedule to do this. And we'll see you again in a month.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.